All right, good morning. Hello and welcome to DOLA's Local Government Resources Call. My name is Ann Miller, and I'm the Director of the Colorado Resiliency Office, or CRO, which is housed within DOLA's Division of Local Government. We're so happy you're here. This bi-monthly call, as you may well know, continues to serve local communities by providing access point to DOLA and our partner agencies and timely and relevant updates and resources to support local government agencies. Let me go through today's agenda. I'll start by providing some general DOLA updates, and then we'll hear from Colorado Circular Communities and the Department of Natural Resources on their programs. Next, we'll get into some federal funding updates from the Governor's Office of Federal Funding and Strategic Initiatives, as well as from the Department of Regulatory Agencies for an update on the Enhanced Premium Tax Credit. Finally, we'll have our webinar focus, which is on whole community recovery, where Matthew Jacobs from the Colorado Resiliency Office will highlight pre and post-disaster recovery planning considerations to include prioritizing segments of the community that are disproportionately impacted by disasters. You're welcome to put questions in the chat or the Q&A feature as we go along. And any questions that we don't get answered by our subject matter experts during the presentation will get addressed at the end. Now we'll get into some general DOLA and partner agency updates. So starting with the State Demography Office, or SDO, they published a new research brief that summarizes data on language spoken at home and English language proficiency in Colorado using data from the American Community Survey. This brief discusses the limitations of this data and documented language spoken at home in small areas. SDO also published the analysis on the current state of Colorado's housing shortfall. This research brief is a comprehensive analysis of the current state of Colorado's housing shortfall. In partnership with the legislature, Governor Polis has signed landmark laws to increase supply and make housing more affordable. Findings show that while Colorado has made gains narrowing the housing gap since its peak in 2019, Colorado requires 106,000 additional housing units to meet its housing needs. The housing shortfall analysis will be discussed at the 2025 State Demography Summit coming up. Both research briefs are available on SDO's webpage. And yes, save the date for the 2025 State Demography Summit on Friday, November 7th at the Arvada Center. This one-day conference will present summaries on SDO's vintage 2024 population estimates and forecast, revisions to the website, and updates on their work over the last year. A live stream broadcast option will also be offered, and sponsorship opportunities are available. And if you want to know more, you can reach out to Adam Bickford. And in the Division of Housing, we are very excited to welcome Tyler Jackal as the new director of DOLA's Division of Housing in advance of Director Allison George's retirement next month. Tyler brings more than 2 decades of experience in housing policy development and program implementation across local, state, and federal levels. Most recently, Tyler served as the chief of the Office of Federal Funds and Strategic Initiatives for Governor Polis, overseeing housing programs and federal stimulus investments that addressed homelessness, housing affordability, and workforce development. Tyler is working part-time now and will start in full capacity on October 7th. Welcome, Tyler. And in the Division of Local Government, DOLA and DLG are pleased to welcome a new member of the regional field team. So Amy Tanabe has been selected as the new regional manager for the Southeast region. Amy has over 23 years of management experience, including 6 years as Otero County Administrator, where she led major infrastructure improvements, secured grant funding, and launched staff development programs. As a 4th-generation Otero County resident who calls Rocky Ford home, Amy is well-known and highly respected throughout the Southeast region. Again, welcome, Amy. Please join the Department of Local Affairs Division of Local Government, Colorado Municipal League, Colorado Counties, Inc., and Special District Association for our annual Small Communities Workshop, hosted in Breckenridge on Thursday, October 16th at the Colorado Mountain College. The workshop is open to organizations statewide and covers important issues facing Colorado's small communities. You'll be able to attend sessions about topics such as housing solutions, infrastructure and economic development, innovation and artificial intelligence in local government, budgeting in times of scarcity, and public engagement and partnership. So it's a packed agenda you won't want to miss. There will also be opportunities to network with DOLA staff and representatives from partner organizations. So visit the workshop page and register by October 3rd. The application deadline for the preliminary funding cycle for the accessory dwelling unit grant program, ADU grant program, has been extended to October 3rd. So grants for this program are exclusively available to certified ADU supportive jurisdictions, and approximately 1.6 million in grants funds are available. Please reach out to staff if you plan to apply and have submitted your report and are awaiting a response from CDO or Community Development Office staff. Okay, and then the brand new local government childcare planning grant program is open through September 24th. So that deadline's coming up. The program provides one-time planning grants to local and tribal governments to help them better understand childcare needs and adopt policy and regulatory best practices in order to promote the development of childcare. Capital construction and design funds are not available through this program, though. Interested applicants must schedule a pre-application meeting with program staff to explore ideas and discuss proposed projects and funding eligibility. DOLA also has recently published updated Proposition 123 fast track guidance, including revised statutory interpretation on the allowable extensions and an easy to use section outlining what is required by local governments in a fast track review process in order to remain eligible for Prop 123 funds. DOLA held a webinar on this new guidance last week, and the recording is now available. And in tomorrow's monthly Housing Strategies Peer Exchange series, Fast Track is the topic of a panel discussion featuring local governments sharing their implementation efforts. So you can register to attend that important session. And then we're getting here to the end of DOLA updates. We've got the Colorado Resiliency Office. We're in the exciting process of updating our Colorado Resiliency Framework. We do that every 5 years. And we've got a lot of engagement opportunities coming up through September and October and November. So we're doing a series of roundtables in the coming weeks. And you can get more information about all of the planning activities by subscribing to our CRF contact list for updates. And we've also got our third virtual resiliency summit, November 13th, where we are going to be getting input on kind of the strategies that are evolving from the process and what we're going to do in the next 5 years. And we are also, the final update from DOLA is around the firefighter cardiac and cancer benefit application. Open now through October 30th for fire departments seeking reimbursement for cardiac and cancer benefit coverage of volunteer part-time and full-time firefighters. So you can get more information on our website there. That's a lot of updates from DOLA. I'm now going to turn it over to Sarah Hernick from the Colorado Circular Communities to talk to you about funding and technical assistance opportunities available to local governments.
Great. Thank you, Anne. Everyone can hear me, right? Okay. So hi, everyone. Thank you for letting me join your call today. I'm Sarah Hernick. I'm a Rural Outreach and Technical Assistance Specialist with the Colorado Circular Communities Enterprise. I also want to introduce Liz Kuhn. She is the Outreach and Technical Assistance Unit Work Lead. She's on the call today to answer questions. So please feel free to put any questions or comments you may have in the chat, and we will get to them. So today, I just wanted to briefly share who we are, how we support local governments throughout Colorado, and how you can learn more about us and engage with our program. So next slide, please. So C3 stands for Colorado Circular Communities, and we are a statewide enterprise focused on supporting projects that re-envision how we produce and manage materials and products to advance Colorado's circular economy. So really what that means is that we provide funding and technical assistance to local governments, tribes, but also schools, businesses, and organizations throughout Colorado for projects such as composting, recycling, reuse, and repair programs. We're funded through landfill tipping fees, and we're housed within the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. We're also guided by a board of directors. So next slide, please. So we support local governments by providing funding and technical assistance to develop and implement projects that advance Colorado's circular economy. And so grant and funding opportunities are available to everyone, whether you're a local government or you're a for-profit business. And you can find out more information about those opportunities on our website, which I'll share on the next slide. But you can see here on the left side of the screen some examples of the projects that would qualify for funding. So you can see sustainable design projects, recycling or composting infrastructure projects, reuse repair programs could qualify for funding from our program. And then on the right side of the screen, you'll see some of our technical assistance projects that we would, or projects that would qualify for our technical assistance. And so local governments, tribes, and public K-12 schools can receive no-cost technical assistance to support local circularity project planning and implementation. So some of those projects could be like waste diversion action plans, ordinance planning, ordinance development, or like stakeholder engagement, behavior change type projects, excuse me. So I just want to point out, these aren't exhaustive lists, and we really encourage creativity. So we're always happy to talk with you about potential projects. And on the next slide, please, sorry, you can find out how to contact us. So I know this presentation was really quick, so please feel free to reach out. Review our website at coloradocircularcommunities.org, or you can scan this QR code here on the left side of the screen. Or if you have a project in mind and you'd like to talk through it or get support on it, please submit an inquiry, which you can also find on our website. If you go to the Engage with Us tab on our website, you can find it there, or you can scan this QR code on our screen. Our team is really friendly, and we love hearing about all the work that's going on through Colorado. So if you're ever in doubt, just send us a message. We're happy to talk through your project, your community's goals, anything like that. So with that, I know that was really fast, but thank you, Dola, for letting me join. Thank you all for listening. And I think Liz has been putting some of our resources in the chat. So yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Sarah. Next, we'll go to Peter Dunleavy with the Department of Natural Resources to talk about technical assistance available through the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission for solar, wind, and energy storage projects.
Good morning. Thank you, Ann, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Pete Dunleavy. I'm with the Energy and Carbon Management Commission. I'm going to move really fast today, too. I have a lot of text on some of these slides for reference, but I'm not going to read through that. If I can go to the next slide. I'm here today to talk about Senate Bill 24212 that was passed by the legislature a little over a year ago, and just to describe some of the subsequent resources that are available to local and tribal governments that are dealing with potential solar, wind, battery storage projects, or even projects related to the transmission lines associated with clean power projects. Next slide. Just a couple of notes on the work and the agencies involved here. Again, I'm with the Energy and Carbon Management Commission, and I do want to reiterate that we do not regulate solar, wind, or battery projects the way we do with oil, gas, or geothermal projects. My role is really to be a point person for the technical assistance requests, and then I can get those questions and answers, get the questions to the right people, coordinate with other state agencies, and provide feedback. Colorado Parks and Wildlife also has some new features related to Senate Bill 24212, and that's led to some increased staff capacity there. Best management practices have been developed for clean energy projects. and mapping of high priority habitats for all project reviews. I'll go to the next slide. This is just a quick overview of work to date. And again, I'm not going to read through this, but a lot of that has been outreach and the development of relationships across the state. Naturally, with a new program like this, people don't know what is available until we can reach them with the information and opportunities. We have developed a new web page for this. We're just finishing the development of a specific intake form where technical assistance can be formally requested. I wish that were live at this moment. We're just fixing a few things right now, so that will be up on our web page probably by the end of the week. Next slide, please. I just wanted to also note some documents that are being posted by the Colorado Energy Office that we have collaborated on related to Senate Bill 24212. One is a code repository for clean energy, which is posted on the CEO website now. And the other is a siting survey report, which is expected to be posted by the end of the month. Both of these documents are really helpful for the review of renewable energy projects. Next slide. With that, I really don't want to take too much of your time. I know we have a packed agenda today. My email and website are listed here. Please feel free to contact me with any additional questions or put them in the chat and I will stay on. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Excellent. Thank you, Peter. We're now going to turn it over to Tara Caruth from the governor's office to provide the latest from the federal level.
Thanks, Anne. Good to be back with you all again. Our updates today will be brief. Can you go to the next slide, please? Oh, and the next one, sorry. The litigation updates to share with you all today. Some of these are repeat. These are cases that the state of Colorado has been challenging some of the Trump administration's actions. Update to terms and conditions cases. There was a preliminary injunction around the Department of Transportation, and then Homeland Security walked back some of their terms and conditions, and we are expecting further guidance from the court this month. Tariffs, there was initial win in district court, but that has now been appealed to the Supreme Court, so more to come there. The biggest win, I think, since we last spoke was around PROWARA, which is around what is a federal benefit and what is required of programs to assess eligible immigration status. And last week received a preliminary injunction preventing enforcement of the new guidance. So basically it returns to the 30-year precedent that everyone had been operating under. And then with NIH, there were some grant terminations. Now the Supreme Court has limited the ability of the district courts to resolve those grant terminations and have moved those portions to the Federal Court of Claims. So more to come on that. That's really the update on litigation. If we could go to the next slide, just a brief update. I'm sure you're all aware and watching the news, anticipating a government shutdown if a continuing resolution is not passed by the end of this month. There's some conflicts between parties right now, but they are putting forth a pretty short term, like 6 or 7 week continuing resolution. So we'll know more soon, but that's a status for the federal budget. And that's all I have for you today. We're going to turn it over to Deborah. Oh, I thought this was, sorry. Anne, you want to say who's next? Because I thought it was Deborah with Department of Regulatory Agencies. Correct? Okay, very good. Thank you.
Hi there. I'm Deb Judy. I'm one of the Deputy Commissioners at the Division of Insurance, and I just want to touch briefly on the enhanced premium tax credits and where things stand on that. As I think you all know, those tax credits are help people buy insurance in the individual market, and they were passed originally during COVID, extended in 2022, but they are now set to expire on December 31st, 2025. The loss of those enhanced premium tax credits will have significant impacts on Coloradans in terms of premiums and enrollments. We estimate right now that we will see average premium increases of about 170% across the state for folks in the individual market, as well as in some areas as high as 300%. So significant impacts, which will mean losses of coverage for many people. We passed House Bill 25-1006 during the special session. The legislature passed that. That will help blunt some of those impacts, but we are still estimating that about 75,000 Coloradans could lose coverage if those enhanced PTCs are not continued. So I guess we would encourage you all, well, first of all, we do have that data, some estimates on the county level. If people are interested in that information, please reach out. But we also encourage everybody to be talking to their congressional delegation about extending the premium tax credits. And I was going to say one more thing and I forgot it. Extending the premium tax credits. Let us know if you need any information on that in that respect, though. Oh, I know what I was going to say now, sorry. And the continuing resolution that was just mentioned right now does not include those, extending those subsidies in it. There is continued talk at the federal level about doing that. So we are closely watching that to see how that will impact Coloradans. And with that, I will wrap it up.
Thank you, Tara and Deborah, for those updates. A reminder to participants to please add any questions in the Q&A or chat. Our presenters will do their best to answer them, and then at the end we'll open it up and get to as many more questions as there are outstanding. But right now we're going to turn our attention to the topic of the day for our featured webinar, which is Whole Community Recovery. Matthew Jacobs, the Recovery Program Manager at the Colorado Resiliency Office, will be our presenter. Thanks, Matthew.
Thanks so much, Ann, for the introduction. Hello, everybody. Good morning. I'm Matthew Jacobs, Recovery Program Manager at the Colorado Resiliency Office. And today I'm going to share some considerations, concepts, and of course, resources as it relates to whole community recovery, both pre and post disaster. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So I just want to take the time to orient first about, really what is DOLA's role in disaster recovery. And more at the higher level, we are the state's grantee for federal housing and urban development grants. And that includes the Community Development Block Grant and also the Community Development Block Grant for Disaster Recovery. This is a congressional approval and it really focuses on meeting those long-term unmet needs across, housing, economic, and even neighborhood and community infrastructure. We utilized some of this funding and rewarded for recent disasters such as the Marshall Fire and also the floods in 2013. So really, we are the ones to receive that and help with that program management and working with local communities to provide that recovery support. But then I want to orient over like two main divisions where under DOLA, that has a huge role within the State Recovery Task Force and what we call recovery support functions. So they're under the Division of Local Government. We are lead on the Community Recovery Support Function. And really, that has a huge role in how if there is certain programs to support long-term recovery that we partner, that we look at those unmet needs. We look at long-term recovery, integrating resilience into the strategy, land use planning. So really partnering and also, if needed, activating what we call long-term recovery working group at the state level in conjunction with the local recovery groups. But then we're also supporting those housing and economic recovery support functions alongside our Division of Housing, and then also the Economic Development and the OED, the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, working very closely with them to support small businesses during economic recovery. And then I'll talk a little bit about the regional manager's role in the upcoming slides, the Colorado Resiliency's office, and then we have the financial assistance team, which during the Marshall Fire runs a program called the Disaster Resiliency Rebuilding Program, which was actually state funding to help with recovery needs during communities after the 20 2018 all the way through the Marshall Fire, specific on the housing recovery program. So that's a lot of information, but just wanted to orient really, where do we fall into this in comparison to some of our partner agencies, such as the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. I also want to highlight that the Division of Housing, we just hired a new role, is a housing recovery program manager who is lead on the housing recovery support function and is also supporting that emergency support function 6, which in the very early stages of disaster really starts to collaborate on that sheltering, identifying rental resources, and then as we transition into those transitional long-term recovery housing needs is a huge support in guiding that effort. Next slide. So I want to start going back to highlighting the DOLA regional manager's role. So there's a lot of different at the state level, from public health, emergency management, these regional roles. And we have an outstanding team that carries extensive experience from local to county and even state governments with financial supports and capacity, strategic planning, project development, but also in recovery. And one thing I really want to point out and highlight is shortly after disaster, they're a huge resource in consulting with what we call setting up a disaster assistance center. So really being able to reach out, consult, and advise how we would set up a disaster assistance center to support survivors. Where would it be located? What partners are we helping?
It looks like Matthew froze for me. Is that the case for everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hopefully his internet will resolve here in a minute. In the meantime, I might just pause to see if there are any questions, Veronica, that you have seen that haven't already been answered. Maybe in the chat. I don't see any in the Q&A.
Can I have Marguerite take a look right now when I'm screen sharing? I can't see the questions.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, it looks like we have answered them. Oh.
Okay, we are on top of it. And in the meantime, I might just go ahead and continue with this presentation, since Matthew is part of the Colorado Resiliency Office, and my hope is he will be able to pop right back on here very shortly. So yes, in terms of the regional managers, I think the point to re-emphasize is that, yeah, we've got a great team, regional managers across the communities. Many of you work very closely with them already. They're your go-to. Marguerite, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, Matthew has joined again. It looks like he's not frozen.
Thank you. Matthew, take it away.
I apologize. The office, I'm at the office and it decided to download the updated version as soon as I'm in the middle of this. So let's carry on. Thank you for your patience. And so I think Anne, and thank you for covering and sitting in on the role of the DOLA regional manager. And then I'm going to go to the next slide. So just really to orient across those different regions about who that go-to is for you at the local government level from across the regions. We have it on our website, and there's a QR code right there as well. Next slide. Now transitioning into the Colorado Resiliency Office support with pre and post disaster recovery efforts. So my position is under the Colorado Resiliency Office, and really working in conjunction with those regional managers and local governments, really looking at building from a pre-disaster standpoint, understanding pre-disaster, what is the profile of the community? Where are there opportunities to build relationships? What are funding available? That coordination piece as needed. After recovery, we also have a huge role in leading that long-term recovery working group. So after the Mount Marshall fire, as we were implementing that housing recovery program, our office helped bring those stakeholders together, continue to monitor how that program was doing, but also stretching and looking forward, helping think about where are there opportunities in the long-term development, in recovery, and resilience opportunities, and where are the gaps and where are the unmet needs? Who isn't taking advantage and why of some of the resources we have, and how are we evaluating how effective we are in providing some of these resources. So being able to do that as an additional support in conjunction to what the regional managers are doing at the ground level supporting, we are also at the state and then with that recovery support function and together as a resilience team, looking at what that long-term resilience goal in connection with recovery could be. Next slide. Now we're going to transition from that orientation from our role as DOLA and how we support whole community recovery to really breaking down what is whole community recovery. It's not necessarily a new term, but from a lot of the lessons learned from Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, a lot of different diverse and intensifying natural disasters over the years. In 2011, FEMA adopted this competent champion, this whole community. And that's across mission areas from response, recovery, across emergency management. But it really recognizes that, our community has a lot of diverse needs, a lot of different resources, networking connections that must be considered. And to really enhance from those and recover from those large, large disasters, we need to be inclusive and really taking advantage and considering all those unique circumstances, which, the government, although the federal government has a lot of resources, and even at the state, from more minor, and local to be able to recover from those minor, if it's so large, if we don't have and aren't making those connections between individuals, nonprofits, even talking within government on resources, we're really not maximizing how we could really effectively recover from a disaster. And with that, transitioning, a big part of whole community recovery is considering that, communities experience it in different ways and have different needs and come from a lot of different positions and backgrounds. And that as a result, disasters don't treat all victims equally. There's a lot of considerations when looking at from the lens from different perspectives that pre-disaster, there's some foundational obstacles, issues, and chronic stressors, whether it be healthcare, housing, a lot of social determinants of health that going into a disaster, those communities, it could be exacerbated even more. So really thinking about that from that context as it relates to community needs and disproportionately impacted communities as it relates to that whole recovery community. Next slide, please. And I wanted to orient, just transitioning to, we've heard this word before, disproportionately impacted communities. And I just wanted to give a context specifically as what does that mean? And what does it mean when it comes to Colorado per statute, actually? So there is statute from the Environmental Justice Task Force define this as understanding that, this is, and again, there's a lot of, it's complex in recovery, and these are by statute, but it doesn't mean that there aren't other considerations within your community or characteristics or factors that we also should be considering in the unique context of our communities. However, these are some really good starting points to utilize and understand when it comes to some of the tools at the state, such as EnviroScreen and the demography office tools of what does this mean for your community, and how are some of these variables when you're integrating this into pre-disaster planning, decisions on land use planning, development, some of the social services, understanding where those vulnerabilities are, and what does that mean if some of these communities are going to be impacted by a disaster? And what can we do to strengthen that community and that planning and integration to really ensure that we're having a whole community recovery approach? Next slide, please. So why is that so crucial now? It's always been crucial, but there's a lot of changes and we're planning for uncertainty right now. even up at the state level, we have strategies that are really from, the Colorado Resiliency Office framework, and even whole state strategies from Homeland Security and emergency management, looking like how do we strengthen together and how do we strengthen Colorado communities and local governments' ability to respond to these. And with the potential changes in federal funding, that's, whether it be healthcare, whether it be other social programs, SNAP programs, whether it be what's FEMA's involvement or not, what technical assistance, what funding. I talked about community development and block grant for disaster recovery. Just the uncertainty of not knowing what funding it will be, how it will trickle down through other social programs that may impact chronic stressors and may change who we consider or increase or diversify who is a disproportionately impacted individual or community across Colorado. And so why is it so important now for those pre-disaster recovery and post-disaster recovery planning and partnerships and network? Is because right now we're planning for a lot of uncertainty and we may not be able to rely on the same resources as we previously were. So taking that initiative, strengthening, understanding, so we also reduce overall human suffering across our communities where we could strengthen it together. Next slide. And so, okay, we've talked about the role of DOLA. We've talked about this whole community recovery concept. And then we've also talked about some of the planning for uncertainty, why this is crucial now, some of the shocks and stressors that are going on. So what are some just practical measures, practical action steps that we could ensure equitable recovery when considering disproportionately impacted communities? And so I want to highlight just a really good resource that was published by FEMA in 2023. And it looks at just overall a really great orientation, just some 8 equitable recovery goals and practical steps that we could do when it comes to pre-disaster recovery planning and post-disaster recovery considerations from an equitable lens. And I'm going to give I'm not going to go through each and every one, but I want to highlight some examples that even today in Colorado communities are doing to push forward and integrate some of these goals. So when we look at one, building an equity into the recovery organization and coordination structure, I want to highlight Larimer County. When they set up the Larimer Recovery Collaborative, when they organized their working groups under this collaborative, they purposely identified an individual needs and an unmet needs working groups that could specifically highlight and target what is being exposed, how are we getting that information, and how are we strategizing, specifically championing those unmet needs and who that impacts. So putting that actually into the recovery structure. Some of the identify unequal patterns of disaster exposure and impact. We talked about some of those tools, utilizing the data tools we have and how to effectively integrate that into hazard planning and recovery planning, from understanding who's disproportionately impacted and what are those social economic challenges, as well as their environmental exposure challenges. That participatory planning process, where when we're making big decisions in rebuilding or development, are we considering the voices or targeting that outreach and being accommodating or modifying how we can get some of these underrepresented groups to the table and hear their voice because they're part of the community and they will be impacted. And monitoring, right? Like we looked at, as we're implementing programs, how are we continually keeping a pulse on who's being serviced, where other unmet needs during the recovery process may peek its head out. What we see in the initial damage assessments is not always necessarily some of the gaps that may happen down the road. Recovery can take years, but those initial stages may uncover different needs, and just really keeping a pulse on that and helping work through to understand so, nobody's left behind from, a lot of the efforts that we're pushing and moving through together. And then, just a final thought of, this is something that is, a long process, and being able to, that the partners going back to its government, its individuals, and especially there's a lot of nonprofits and community-based organizations who are a huge part of helping this. So just really forming that network, I couldn't reinforce the importance of all the partners involved, as it's a community plan in recovery, not an emergency plan. Next slide, please. And just a highlight of some of the recovery tools and resources that we provide at the Colorado Resilience Office. Peer exchanges. During COVID, after the wildfires, just bringing those networks together of different local government staff and planners to be able to talk and learn from each other. The state here, we're here to be a resource, but we're also here to help make sure that who's been through this can share those insights and networks across different partners. We're doing that right now with the Wildfire Resiliency Code Board. So we have that monthly right now. And you can see that if you follow some of the resources link, and encourage, as we're working through the implementation of this, is just bringing together, whether it's looking at mapping, whether it's looking at staff capacity, how can we learn from each other and who's done this before? And maybe there's areas that's new that we can talk about and collaborate together on moving forward. There's also some different pre and post disaster recovery toolkits and guidance, including templates. What are practical steps if you have never done recovery before and you're just starting out, really getting in that plan process, and you need to, even basics of organizing and those steps of, pre, like getting that together, but also post, if we need to start identifying projects and that integration with other efforts, what are some really practical steps? I'll talk about planning for hazards guide a little bit more in a little bit to go into that. But really looking at those tools and strategies when we're talking about land use planning, and that important strategic connection between that emergency management piece and that long-term planning and big impactful opportunities when it comes to rebuilding and development decisions, and what you can leverage at the local level to help reduce the impacts of the disasters and enhance resilience. And then there's some practical guides from the funding guide. We have a list of different funding opportunities that we continually on the CRO webpage list out, and then also a local guide. But within that resilient recovery resources, it really gives a lot of really good tools. And then also we've from the community level, the housing and the economic, there's also some with our partners, we've posted some resources outside of the state as well. Federal level and other states we've looked at are just, really vetted some of the ones that come to the top that could be really useful tools in the recovery process and planning. Next slide, please. All right. So let's go transition into, and how are we doing on time? Okay, 11:43, great. So why is planning for hazards so important? So dovetailing, we talked earlier, that whole community process, right? And looking at disproportionately impacted communities, looking at individual residents. But one thing I want to highlight is it's really important also to understand what are the tools and connections in whole community within government, and different roles that bringing that integration together. And a huge part is community development and that planning opportunity, comprehensive planning opportunities for big change over many years, both pre and post. And so why is this important? A lot of these factors, I think it would be hard to overlook. We're growing. Hazards are getting more intense. Just the wild urban interface, the grasslands, all those different obstacles we're facing, and it is increasingly over years with the impacts of a lot of changes in climate, is getting more complex. And so why this tool? It's cost effective. We've had a lot of case studies and research to show that the investment on some of these up front between not implementing some of these tools is really, really avoiding those future avoidable costs. It's really helping leverage. Well, we don't need to react on this if we build that resilience and mitigation. Far-reaching, so expansive across different local governments from city to county levels, and it's flexible. There's not a one-size-fits-all and one solution that fits all. It's very diverse in different strategies, tools, from incentives to development rights building codes, as we've seen with the Wildfire Resiliency Code. So there's a lot of different ways that nature-based solutions, there's a lot of ways that would be unique to what you value in your community and how we think about mitigation and recovery. Next slide. So I want to take a step back when looking at cascading impacts and all hazards and tell a story that I personally experienced that really oriented me to the cascading impacts in Colorado. I was living in Manitou Springs. I don't know if we remember the Waldo Canyon fire in 2012. I had a house on the side of the ridge, and I realized, just very new to Colorado, my first wildfire experience, this thing was coming over the opposite side. Wildfire was just blazing. Now, luckily, it didn't reach my house and it was under control. And just, my first experience of the wildfire, massive wildfire. But what I wasn't connecting the dots is the very next year, the rains, which was 2013, the cascading impacts of the rain that came down, the unstable soil on that side that was burned, and the massive mudslide and the houses that were rolling down the hills of that cascading impact. That was my first exposure to that, and understanding when land use planning for hazards that we're not looking and planning for something in a silo, that we're connecting those dots about how natural disaster and those cascading impacts from one event to over into another. And when we're strategizing and we're thinking about that's something we can't be overlooked and has to be considered in the strategies and tools that we consider in the partners we're bringing in who have expertise in those areas during pre and post disaster recovery planning. Next slide, please. And another important part of this is integration across plans. Right, when we're looking at this whole community approach and planning for hazards, there's a lot of plans, an abundance of different community plans that are going on right now. It's very easy to get siloed, but taking the time to maximize the benefits, because we're all doing a master comprehensive plan. A lot of us have a hazard mitigation plan, and where we are varying on where we are with the recovery or if there's a community wildfire protection plan. And are they talking? Is comprehensive plans, when we're looking at these massive rebuilding and development decisions, considering the hazards and be driven by and integrated into those decisions? Are those emergency managers talking and collaborating with those planners in those big decisions? And are we maximizing the co-benefit opportunity? I've heard, I don't know if anybody's heard this saying, but if you do have a disaster, don't let it go to waste. If there is supplemental funding and we have these goals that it's best pre-disaster to outline them, and we have some supplemental funding or have the opportunity to rebuild back more resilient, let's connect the dots between some of the pre-planning, the goals, the things we've talked about pre-disaster if possible to make them happen. On where can we reinforce the goals that are happening across these different plans to strengthen them, and even enhance the possibility of if there could be potential funding. So just reinforcing, there's a tool right there. It's called the Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard Guidebook. I'd encourage you all to dig in there and just see how you can use that tool to help strengthen integration and see where there's opportunities there. Next slide, please. And then I just want to reinforce this tool that we have called the Planning for Hazards Land Use Solutions for Colorado. So we recently did a whole revamp on this. So new web design, making it more accessible, did a really good review about the content, how we're displaying information. And then we're continuing to get that ongoing review and feedback from our partners. So reaching out to some of the subject matter experts, leaving that open door for you too, as you were reviewing. And if you're utilizing this, to reach out to us about some of the practices that you've maybe been implementing that we could highlight. There's also model codes, model examples. So those tools and resources span from starting off with how to use the guide, some of the key hazards that are going on from wildfire to drought to extreme heat to flooding, and then connecting with really practical tools that at the local government level and your planners can lean on and leverage when it comes to whether it's incentives, whether it's model building codes, whether it's protecting certain areas, whether it's nature-based solutions, all these different tools that I would encourage to reach in there and explore what that could look like during the pre-disaster process and comprehensive planning. So just want to reinforce that it's an awesome tool and we've just revamped it. Next slide. And now, after this, I know this is, we've had, 30 to 40 minutes talking about this. It's a lot of information. But with that, I want to reinforce some training opportunities. One, right now, in partnership with the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, their recovery team is going around from these cycles from each region to bring together these recovery partners to have these conversations about, who's who in the zoo, who does what, what is recovery, who should be a part of it. What are resources from the federal level? How should I be thinking about if I need to get started on a recovery plan? And even just walking through and bringing in a panel of different experts and also really important partners to speak from their lens about recovery from the state level. That's actually happening tomorrow for the West region in Montrose. So it's continuing to go around. So if you have any questions on upcoming within your region, and I'd encourage to be engaged, just reach out. Kelly Strife from the recovery section at DHSCM is leading those efforts, but we're also always happy to be a liaison to connect that. And then integrating access and functional needs into emergency management. The access and functional needs team, we've partnered them to really go out and help teach about those considerations for individuals with different needs before, during, and after a disaster, whether it be sheltering, whether it be recovery, whether it be planning, whether it be training and exercise. So really looking at that. And these are some of the ones below, more, in partnership with other training consortiums across the United States, such as the University of Hawaii. They hold the community planning for disaster recovery on the mitigating hazards with land use planning. We brought that to Colorado last year, I believe last year, it was 2 Mays ago, excuse me. And to really reinforce that concept of driving hazards in connection with comprehensive planning. And how that informs each other. And then the disaster, the local community role, recovery from disaster. That's a course that anybody can request through their recovery manager and through the state. It's a FEMA, and then disaster recovery in rural communities. That is another one that can be requested through the state training officer for more of that rural recovery perspective. So just some high-level trainings that, and of course, outside of this, you have questions. I'm happy to help and put you in the right direction for where you could request or where they're available. Next slide, please. Okay. For the Colorado Resiliency Framework update, Anne, did you want to chime in on this or?
Yeah, thank you, Matthew. So well, I guess just first of all, I want to thank Matthew for a really thought-provoking, informative session, and I hope you all take advantage of many of the great resources and just Matthew as a resource to support you. But as we mentioned earlier in our opening, we really do invite you to help us shape the next 5 years and priorities and actions that collectively we work on together to build a more resilient Colorado and address some of these topics that Matthew highlighted in this session. So again, if we invite you to come to our final Resiliency Summit on November 13th, the registration link was posted earlier. And we also have a survey for individuals and organizations that will be available that you can fill out anytime and give us your feedback through October. So with that, we've got a few minutes left here. There's a variety of ways that you can stay connected here. I know we have a couple questions in the Q&A here. David Clark, he had asked Matthew is curious how at the district level we can best support and advertise the Colorado Resiliency Office to our constituents.
So I would say the first thing that I want to highlight is it's a great opportunity right now as we're going through the Colorado Resiliency Framework update. So, the opportunities of, when we have that next virtual summit on November 13th that Ann highlighted, understanding what are some of the efforts we're doing and really looking at it, providing that feedback, understanding that. And, I think that's a really good practical first step to orient as we're going through this Colorado Framework update. And then also being able to share a lot of the resources where it's relevant that I've just shared today, starting at some of the webinars, some of the resources, some of the peer exchanges. There's really good ways to get into, depending on what perspective you're coming from, to get involved with some of the efforts we're doing and sharing out those resources, even from our webpage of what's the interest of that individual, of where they're trying to utilize those resources, whether it's from mitigation, overall resilience, and recovery. So really reinforcing those tools. And then from a local government level, not being shy to engage that regional manager, at the ground level where they could provide that expertise, because we're going to be in lockstep and connection. It's a team effort between the CRO and the regional managers.
But I dropped in again the link to our website where you can kind of find everything you need to know, that a lot of what we mentioned today. And just as a reminder, we will be sharing the notes as well as the presentation from today. There is one other final comment question, and thank you, Scott, for just your interest in engaging with these topics of resiliency and microgrids and the work that you're doing in your development work. And we look forward to staying in touch and working with the local government partners that might be able to help advance some of that good work. So appreciate your involvement here. I'll do kind of a last call for questions. I'm not seeing any others come in right now, but I just want to thank all of our speakers and all of the participants today for sticking with us. And there's a lot of information. So like I said, we'll share some of those resources and all the links so you can go back to that later. Stay tuned for our topic announcements. We've got our next webinar and call, local government resources call, in 2 months, November 19th. So we will hopefully see you back soon. And in the meantime, reach out if you need any support from any of us here at the state. Thank you again. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.